Are the critics right? Is this a dangerous law that will threaten Canadians' freedom? Or is the government right? Is it necessary to fight terrorism right now? Joining me now from the foyer of the House of Commons before the vote is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety, Roxanne James. The NDP Public Safety critic is Randall Garrison, and the Liberal Public Safety critic is Wayne Easter. Great to see all of you. Roxanne James, I'll start with you. It's expected to pass third reading tonight. The government, and then goes to the Senate, of course. The government has only made minor changes. There's still no parliamentary oversight that critics wanted. Critics still say the definition of terrorism is too broad. They still say it allows CSIS to violate charter rights. It puts the judges in an awkward position. How do you put so many critics' feelings at ease about this bill?
Well, first of all, Evan, as you know, there were legislative gaps that were clearly identified by national security agencies. Those gaps became even more clear after the October attacks here in Canada. Of course, we've had before committee, we've had the RCMP talk about the number of individuals that they're monitoring that are, are planning to travel overseas to join ISIL or have returned from engaging in terrorist activity. We only need to look to the 6 o'clock news to hear of more incidents of terror around the world. We brought in these measures as a direct response to these very attacks. The fact that the Islamic State, ISIL, has put Canada on a list of countries to carry out attacks on. We saw what has occurred here in Canada.
But hang on, I understand what motivated the idea of having a security bill. No one's debating the need for security. We're trying to debate the merits of the bill, and there are legitimate concerns, not that security is needed, but that the particulars of this bill overstep the bounds. So let's no parliamentary oversight. Judges are. No, I'm just saying these are the concerns. Judges are being put in a position not to greenlight warrants, but to allow the police to fundamentally violate the charter. They've never done that before. How do you justify that?
Well, that's not entirely true. Judges make decisions on warrants all the time. Right in within the bill itself, with regards to the additional tools that CSIS will be able to do, they actually have to provide pages and pages of documentation supporting a request for a warrant. Of course, the judge reviews that.
You're making a very, I just sorry to interrupt, but it's a very important distinction. Right now, judges make sure that warrants comply with the charter. Your bill allows them to say there is reasons that the judge can say to overstep the charter. Judges don't do that. That is a brand new step. But judges now say this complies. Now you're asking judges to make a determination why they should overstep the charter.
Well, the reason why warrants are requested is because they do overstep the boundaries and infringe on personal rights. For example, a wiretap. A police officer can't simply go in and place a wiretap on someone's home. They have to get a warrant to do that. That's the reason why warrants are
with the charter.
And that's exactly right, because the charter actually, there's a section 8 of the charter that allows the judge to take a look at the request for the warrant and determine whether it needs to be overstepped, whether the boundaries there can be met in order to ensure public safety. That's exactly what this bill does. With regards to the bill itself, we have been very clear from the beginning that this does not infringe on personal freedoms or rights. This bill is targeting terrorism, terrorists as a whole. It's very unfortunate, Evan, that throughout this committee process, throughout the entire, in fact, even the first panel that I was on, that the NDP has misled Canadians on what's actually in this bill. Okay. We have been very clear. We had expert witnesses come in. Some had more than 30 years of experience in law enforcement intelligence gathering.
Okay, I want to hear from them. I mean, the Privacy Commissioner, Danielle Terry, who I spoke to, he told me explicitly on CBC Radio's House, I'd like to appear at committee because I'm very concerned about privacy violations. The Conservative on the committee prevented him from appearing.
Actually, that's not correct. We all had opportunities to put witnesses forward. The NDP and the Liberals chose not to bring the Privacy Commissioner.
That is not true. No, to be fair, I have to correct the record. The NDP did invite the Privacy Commissioner, and the committee is controlled by Conservatives. To set up a separate meeting.
But I'll be honest with you, we brought in law enforcement agencies, people who could actually talk about the very threat that is happening here in Canada and around the world. Every single person, every credible witness that came in with law enforcement experience, whether it be in policing, whether it be in anti-terrorism, whether it be someone who studied it, intelligence gathering, all said the threat is growing, the threat is real, and it has evolved, and we need to make sure that the legislation meets that evolving threat. That is the legislation that we brought forward, and we will make sure that this legislation passes.
All right, and we know it will pass tonight. Mr. Garrison, a couple things. First of all, on the Privacy Commissioner, did the NDP invite the Privacy Commissioner? That's the first thing, and your views on the role that judges will play here in terms of the charter.
Well, we moved a motion in the committee to invite the Privacy Commissioner, and the Conservatives voted it down. So it was very clear.
In addition to your regular witnesses.
It was done in public, because the Privacy Commissioner, of course, is an officer of Parliament. He's not just somebody off the street that we invite in. He's our main privacy advisor as parliamentarians, and you clearly didn't want to hear from him. Just like you didn't want to hear from most Canadians on this bill.
That's
and
not
so
true.
when you talk about what the witnesses said, the government, including yourself, is very good at quoting the first half of what they said. Yes, there's a terror threat, but they leave out the second half. 45 out of the 48 witnesses said this bill was flawed. Some of them said it shouldn't go ahead altogether.
We actually brought amendments to address some of those concerns, but people were not completely understanding.
Let Mr. Garrison finish. Mr. Garrison, go ahead.
Well, it's very clear that the government had no intention of listening to anyone or changing this bill in any significant way. From the very beginning, they tried to limit debate so the public couldn't find out what's going on. They limited the witnesses severely in committee. They limited the debate again at report stage.
More than 50 witnesses at committee on this bill. More than 50 witnesses.
You know, Ms. James, I let you talk.
Hey, go ahead, Mr. Garrison, finish up. Go for it.
So what we have here is a government that's bound and determined very stubbornly to go ahead. We have not had any report on the shooting here in Ottawa. We've had no report on the shooting in Quebec, or sorry, the running down of a Canadian Forces member in Quebec. We haven't had the latest report from the Minister on terrorism threats, yet the government says this bill responds to the real threats. Then why don't we have any of those reports on what the threats are? Okay. So we not only believe this bill will violate civil liberties, we also believe it'll be ineffective in fighting terrorism. And one of your very police witnesses that you cite when he came to committee, who's Steve Irwin, Inspector Irwin from Toronto, you asked him very clearly in committee, will this drag in legitimate dissent? And he said, yes, I'm afraid it will. Well, so if you're going to quote witnesses, you need to quote their whole testimony.
All right. By the way, Margaret Atwood, well-known author, tweeted out today, Bill C-51 is about to be passed. See you in the slammer, kids. Wayne Easter, where are you? I mean, the Liberals support this bill. I mean, I'm trying to, and I know the Liberals' line is, we think it's got to be rejigged, but we're supporting it. But why are the Liberals supporting a bill that you yourself keeps calling flawed?
Well, it's both. There is measures in the bill that are important to keep Canadians safe, and that's what we've said. We have to err on the side of public safety in terms of this bill. We recognize there's flaws in the bill, but there's three key areas that we think are necessary. One is improvements with respect to preventive arrest. Two is the no-fly lists are being improved, and three is the sharing of information between departments and agencies. There was three of the amendments to the bill out of the four that were really indirectly Liberal amendments, and we think that improved the bill somewhat.
And you think those outweigh your concerns for oversight? Those outweigh your concerns about information?
What we have here right now is a parliament that really doesn't work well, and we have to err on the side of public safety. The government is raising the fear factor to no end. The NDP is raising the fear factor in civil liberties to no end, and we can't find the middle ground. I believe
Mr. Easter, you're supporting the bill. I'm not. You're the opposition. You're supporting a bill and trying to oppose it at the same time.
We are supporting the measures in the bill that will enhance public safety. And what we've said, because we are within months of an election campaign, we will put the leader of the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, has made it clear that we'll put three major amendments in our election platform, which will happen in October. The need for national oversight, which all our Five Eyes partners have, which this government refuses to take. Sunset clauses that would make certain aspects of the law cease to exist in 3 years, and a mandatory statutory review in 3 years to look at the good and the bad and the ugly.
The bells are ringing.
That's a responsible position, and we're the only party that has a responsible position.
Roxanne James, go ahead.
In the middle of their activities. I can't imagine putting a sunset clause onto something that CSIS is doing to disrupt threats or to do intelligence gathering or to try and keep Canadians safe, that a sunset clause would actually say in 3 years' time they have to cease doing what they're doing.
Roxanne James, to be fair, let me just remind you, it was Stephen Harper, when he was in opposition, that demanded the Liberals put in sunset clauses after 9/11. That was Stephen Harper's very amendment. Why is he now opposed to it?
The sunset clauses specifically introduced by the opposition parties in committee were absolutely ridiculous. To think that someone in the middle of an investigation would stop or cease doing what they were doing because of a sunset clause.
To be fair, sunset clauses, as we know, and I'm only quoting Mr. Harper on this, it's a review. He said these are that you review them, that you don't, it's not a drop dead date where you have to throw it out.
And,
I mean, that's what Stephen Harper did.
Government and committees can study any piece of legislation at any point during the duration of a session. It's up to that government to force a mandatory review that could hinder the activities of our national security agencies. It's just not a great thing to do at this point in time.
They go up and they go down.
It's very clear. The NDP said we'll repeal this bill if we're elected. So the only choice voters have who are concerned about this is to elect an NDP majority government in the fall.
Okay, well, hang on.
Kerr said two things, Randall. He first said he wouldn't repeal a bill. Now he's saying he would. Which is it?
Well, hang on. Let me show you what Joyce.
I got a minute here. Here's
Joyce Murray, a liberal.
And CSIS was blindfolded.
Mr. Garrison, here's Joyce Murray saying how dangerous it would be if the NDP repealed it. Check this out.
I would ask the member whether he would want it on his conscience. Should be there an attack that leads to deaths of Canadians because of the loopholes that this bill is attempting to fix.
She's essentially saying that people could die if you don't support this bill. What do you say to her?
Well, I'd say very clearly that no one has demonstrated what these gaps are that people keep talking about. We had the RCMP commissioner. We had the RCMP commissioner in committee, and I asked him.
Where were you in October? I don't understand.
So hang on, let him speak. I want to hear your answer to this. Go ahead, Mr. Garrison.
We had the RCMP commissioner in committee, and I asked him very clearly with the shooting in Ottawa, were there any gaps in the legislation that would have prevented prosecution of the shooter? He said no. Were there any gaps? Were there any gaps?
After the fact, he clarified that.
Roxanne James, I'm going to ask you. Sorry, can he let him get one sentence out here, Mr. Garrison?
But it's very misleading what he's saying.
Well, you know, I know they let you speak. Please. Let Mr. Garrison finish the sentence. Mr. Garrison, go ahead.
So we asked him, was there any problem with information sharing between government departments that inhibited your investigation of the shooting here in Ottawa? And he said no. So I've seen neither the Liberals nor Conservatives demonstrating to me what the gap is we're filling with this legislation. We've had successful prosecutions.
Well, I should point out, Michelle Colon, the head of CSIS, told the Senate committee that the terrorist threat in Canada, quote, has never been as direct or as immediate. What's wrong with that?
Evan, what the RCMP commissioner actually said was, he said, because, I mean, basically we were looking at someone who was dead in the halls of the House of Commons here. They were able to get that information because it was after the fact, and that's what's being left out of this conversation. Of course they were able to get an investigation going and obtain that information. The incident had already taken place. The terror attack already occurred. We're talking about the NDP, where a member yesterday called that incident an unfortunate incident. Couldn't even come to terms with the fact that it was a terrorist attack. That's what we're dealing with. The
reality is the minister himself, when he was before committee, said that a number of up to 80 had violated Canadian law, and the government failed to use Section 810 of the Criminal Code, which is already there. But police authorities and CSIS are telling us they do need additional authorities, especially in preventive arrest, in order to get the prosecutions. So we have to go that far, and we have to err on the side of national security, and we can fix this bill following the election.
All right, I got to leave it there. The bells are going. You guys have to get in a vote. Roxanne James, Randall Garrison, Wayne Easter. We'll be watching that vote live. Thanks so much for your arguments tonight.